In Casper, Wyoming, workers break up the concrete foundations of what was once the world's largest oil refinery. Closed in 1991, it had produced much of the gas and oil used by U.S. forces in World War II. The gravel they're making will be used in the roads and walking trails of a vast, multiple-use urban space to include offices, an Olympic-style kayak run, and a championship golf course. Remarkably, most of this massive cleanup project lies just 5 minutes from Casper's bustling downtown. What might have remained an eyesore in the heart of the state's second-largest city is becoming both a model for creative urban planning and a blueprint for effective collaboration between regulatory agencies, industry, and the public. While communities nationwide struggle with the legacy of 150 years of industrial growth, the question arises, how did Casper, with a small population and limited resources, do it? Why did they succeed while others have remained stuck with polluted sites? Why here? Why now? Why Casper?
The first time I heard about the collaborative process, I was scared to death.
Because in the beginning, we were just there and nobody, there was no manual, there was no instructions, there was no anything. Nobody knew what to do.
What we were trying to do is to create, to bring the community together, to create a vision.
It was clear to me, and I think it was clear to everybody in the courtroom, that action had to be taken.
The process happened in 3 years. Typically you're looking at 10 years to do this, so I think collaboration made it go a lot quicker.
It could have been a disaster if we hadn't had hardcore activists in this city.
And we need a panoramic camera to take the picture of all the people that made this happen.
In 1991, the people of Casper received some bad news. In a meeting with Wyoming's Governor Mike Sullivan and its senators Alan Simpson and Malcolm Wallop, Amoco, the owner of the refinery, announced it was pulling out. The aging plant was no longer economically viable and would be closed by year-end. Long one of the main engines of the local economy, the refinery had provided good jobs to generations of Casper citizens and was an important part of the city's tax base and civic leadership.
I would say at least 80% of the people in Casper had something to do with the refinery.
That refinery supported a lot of other businesses besides just the oil business.
It sits in the heart of the community. It was a major employer. I think my recollection is that it was about 300 jobs that were lost with that announcement, and those were very good jobs for this community, well-paying jobs.
The impact on the community was felt by all of us. It was a significant impact both economically and emotionally because, as you know, the Amoco properties sit in the middle of our community, and they were an active heart of the community.
Along with the economic impact came another enormous issue. What would be done with the heavily contaminated site? The Casper refinery was built in 1913 by Midwest Oil Company to process petroleum from the rich Salt Creek oil fields 40 miles to the north. Standard Oil of Indiana built an adjacent facility, bought out the Midwest operation, later becoming Amoco and eventually BP. For a brief period in the 1920s, the refinery was the largest in the world.
Environment was a word that existed in the dictionary. But the plant manager and the chief engineer at that particular time and the management in general were concerned with the fact that there might be such a thing as the pollution that could occur.
Nearly 80 years of operation had saturated the soil and invaded the water table with an estimated 30 million gallons of oil. To complicate matters, the refinery site straddled the North Platte River, which runs through the center of Casper. Any cleanup would have to prevent oil from migrating into off-site groundwater and the river. To address this problem, the company had been pumping and treating contaminated water since 1981, but now a permanent solution needed to be found.
The Amoco property was mired in litigation. It was essentially a walled compound, so to speak.
Not surprisingly, some Casper residents feared the presence of untreated toxic material in their neighborhoods.
I was sure that it was going to come across the street down here at 13th Street and eventually get into our neighborhoods.
And if we didn't act, we were going to be the losers. The ordinary working class people that had the property around here, and the government was going to continue their policy, which was hands off, a wink and a nod, do nothing. That was my opinion.
Jane Sullivan, wife of then Governor Mike Sullivan, had both deep roots in the community and a desire to help.
What we were trying to do is to create, to bring the community together to create a vision. And we felt that a vision of something, a vision is so important because it gives you a goal.
Though the visioning process would take years to bear fruit, the relationships established within the community would prove invaluable. In the meantime, negotiations between the EPA, Wyoming DEQ, and Amoco on the cleanup of the refinery appeared to be going nowhere. In 1996, a group of private citizens went to court. Frustrated with the lack of progress and concerned their health was being compromised by contamination, 11 residents of the community were represented in a suit against Amoco and 2 other corporations for damages related to industrial pollution. Tensions in the community heightened.
For about 2 years, almost every day, we put in hour after hour after hour of reading and digging and doing everything we could to build up this suit.
While the lawsuit worked its way through the courts, others were taking a less confrontational approach. Dennis Hemmer, head of the Wyoming Department of Environmental Quality, felt strongly that community involvement was essential.
The community was a partner. The community was involved in it. So often with particularly a RCRA site, you go through these incredible studies. You come back to the public once a year and you say, okay, here's what we've studied in the last year and this means whatever. You give them an hour to digest what you've done for a year. In this one, they got a constant input into it, constant input of what they wanted it to look like, constant input as to so that they were comfortable it was protective.
Federal regulators were also keeping a close watch on the case. Felix Flechas is the Environmental Protection Agency's site project manager for Region 8 in Denver.
In the mid-90s, we realized that the work that was being done really needed to involve a local element, a participation by the community, because the decisions that were being asked of EPA at that point were decisions that involved land use.
Then, in January of 1998, Judge Brimmer ruled on the private citizen's case.
I think that there was a pivotal point in the case when I ruled that there had been pollution, there had been a violation of the environmental laws, and that this company had to do something about it. It seemed to me that that got their attention.
While awarding relatively small damages to the plaintiffs, he issued a strongly worded injunction against Amoco and its stalled cleanup of the refinery site.
Judge Brimmer allowed our intervention, and that really started a 6-month period of intensive negotiations with the company, Amoco at the time,